My name is Ricardo Checchi. I'll be talking a little bit about integrative programming today. A little background of myself. I am an assistant professor at UMass Boston. We have a bachelor's in IT. So the experience I'm going to bring here is more from the fourth-year program. Actually, I'm going to be talking about what happened in a fourth-year course. But the goal is to see, I'm going to ask for your help, because a lot of the students that we get come from community colleges. So, and there's a lot of knowledge that it could be useful if we add it into the earlier programming courses, so that by the time they get it to us, they have some of this knowledge and experience. So let me talk a little about the problem that I found. Let me give you a little bit of context. Not only I teach this course in integrative programming as the director of the BSIT, I was teaching the capstone, and I freaked out because what I saw is students who didn't know how to collaborate. They didn't know how to, if they have to build an application, they don't know how to say, you do this part, I do this. How do we connect them? And it's things from programming 101. I wasn't even talking about advanced programming. They didn't know how to get together and say, okay, this is the method, you work on this, I work on this, and this is how we connect them. They did not know that part. They're very fundamental part of programming. Half the students knew it because they figured it out. Half the students did not know it. And that I found out in the capstone. So when they are about to come out, I find out that they didn't know some basics about programming. So this is more or less what it boiled down to, things that students didn't know that I think they should know. They don't know how to share code. They don't know how to agree on how to connect these separate pieces of code. They don't know how to share libraries. Okay, I do it. And the difference between sharing code and sharing library, I'm going to talk about it later, is a white box, black box kind of thing. In the sharing code is, I give you the code, you can see exactly what you do. In the sharing library, I'm not giving you the code. I'm giving you the binaries, the software. You can use it, you can call the methods, but you don't know how it does it. That's the difference between one and the other. And they, of course, if they don't know number 1 and 2, they are not going to get even anywhere close to know how to document code, which is another thing that could be useful, and I'm going to talk about that too. Those are things that they should be learning early on in the program. Other things I found they didn't know is they didn't know some conceptual issues about client-server. Do they need to know client-server? No. They don't need to know how to program client-servers. But they should understand what a server is. And by what a server is how does a server operate differently from a standalone application or even a client application. And they don't know that you have to run a server and have it wait for the client to connect. They did not, what? What does that mean? So they don't know this difference between a standalone application, a client application that has to call on a server, and a server application that has to wait for connection. They were not aware of those different things. It gets worse, but that's... they did not understand the infrastructure for it. We teach them how to program. They know they have to install Java, and this is more within the Java context. So if you're a Windows person, it's similar with .NET, but my experience with Java. They know they have to install Java. Okay, now let's move into the enterprise side. Let's talk about containers. Let's talk about servlets. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the story of this one student who was very willing, good student, needed some background. some students didn't know how to connect, how to match languages to these servers. They did not understand that a JavaScript works on a browser setting, inside a browser, or that a servlet needs a web server to operate. They did not know these things. So these are the kind of things that I'm talking, okay, if you don't know that, some of these they need to learn as they learn to program. Because it's not just, okay, this is programming. Okay, let's give them context. This is the standalone part of programming. If you want to put it on a server, you need to add this. If you want to put it on a client, this is what's missing. And that is the part of the operation that it's missing. So these are all things that are missing. So my experience, and this was my experience with the Capstone project, which interestingly enough, I teach the Capstone ICT integration. My original structure for the integration was, okay, I'm going to teach architecture, the architecture side of integration, because they already know all the programming stuff. So I have to go and dumb it down, and I'm going to show you how much I have to dumb it down for in the future, so that I introduce programming, but instead of teaching them what an if and a while and array and all that stuff, I'm going to teach them how a program works from a connections standpoint. But in the Capstone, I assigned them a project. And I said, okay, let's build this system at UMass. We have a huge parking problem. And by huge parking problem, I mean by 10:30 a.m. all parking lots are full. The main ones, the main campus parking lots, so you have to start going further and further away. And if you know that in advance, you just go there. If you don't know it, you're stuck. So I said, okay, let's build a mobile app that checks on this parking database and can tell you, as you are getting into campus, you know which parking the lots are full and which ones are empty. Of course, when I asked administration, can we do this, there were security constraints, so we couldn't access the actual system. But I made up a server fake one. And they say, okay, you connect to this when you create your server-side application, and you create your mobile application, and your mobile application connects to your server application. The server application queries the database. Voila. So it's simple, right? You would think. But of course, they don't know what a server is. And they got stuck there. So this is pretty much the structure. I give them the parking application that has the original data, so they have to build their own version of the server and their mobile, and the mobile connects to their server. So they have to make one simple server, one mobile app. And I give them access to the database directly here to make it easier. So, look, just happened there. Okay, I just talked about that. So I had two teams of students. This is one of the earlier classes that we have, so we don't have a whole lot of traffic. So we had two teams. One team, none of these teams knew much about client server, actually building a client server. None of these teams knew anything about the language and the structure of how to build a mobile app. So there were two challenges. They had to learn these two technologies in the project. One team had decent knowledge of networking, so they could understand how to put it in the into how to build it into their programming, into the programs. I'm not going to talk about that, but one of the things that we are lacking in general is when we teach networking from an administration perspective, from a systems administration. We do not teach networking from a programmatic perspective. So every time when I get this, I have to teach them what a network is from a Java standpoint. How everything they learn in networking applies to using it in programs. They know how to connect them, they know how to use them, they don't know how to program them. But one team was willing, the other team, or one team knew, none of the team knew how to do it. One team knew how to do research on this, the other team, not so much. One team had good language skills. And this one team, they did know how to collaborate, how to split a program into pieces and then know the interconnections. The other team, not so much. And none of the teams had any knowledge of mobile programming. My original specifications, I said, okay, I would like, if only because this is a capstone, that you use these conditions, or you meet these conditions. Of course, the network was going to be TCP/IP. For the network or the integration part, I would apply that they use some sort of XML to connect the client and the server over an HTTP connection. And that presented some challenges because that would add another layer of complexity, another thing they had to learn. So I ended up saying, okay, if you can query the original database, put the results into an XML file, build your server so that your client just queries, gets that XML file and interprets. Okay, we went from being very ambitious to be not so ambitious. Team number one was perfectly fine with that alternative scenario. Team number two still had problems, and these are some of the things that I said, okay, build the server application. Okay, student comes and says, I'll do it in JavaScript. Yeah. No, but that's a client and you need a browser. How are you going to run a server application from a browser? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to build a servlet. I'm going to make it as a servlet. Okay, but since this is a capstone, part of the assignment was, okay, then you have to tell me, you not only have to build the application, you also have to tell me what kind of infrastructure you will need for your application. Come again? So they didn't know that they needed a web server to run the applet and how to start the applet. They just knew how to program the applet. But then, okay, what do I do with this? That's what we are not really teaching them. We are teaching them how to program, but not necessarily how to run programs, other than from within the Java virtual machine and the standard edition. Anything out of this Java standard edition is a problem. And I know I'm not saying we should teach them these in the earlier years. We should teach them the difference so that they know where to go and find out and figure it out. That's my point. I don't want them to know everything, to understand all of this. But at least that they understand the context and where each of these things fit. So, this is an ongoing process. Yes?
Do you have a class that teaches someone how to set up a server? Or do you expect them to know?
How to set up a server. So what's
do you want them to know how to do that? How do they run?
This class, it's interesting, and here I'm mixing two classes that I taught the same semester and the same year because I'm teaching the integration part and I'm teaching the capstone. So I'm talking about mostly the capstone and the things that they didn't know that I'm going to teach on the other class. From the capstone perspective on the class that you say, if they don't know it, the way our program is set up, we have, at that time we had two tracks. One was information architecture where they focus on developing systems, information systems, and satisfying business needs. and the other track is system administration. And there's only one capstone course for these two tracks. Interestingly enough, in that course, I had a third group, which was system administrators. So the way I did it, I did some role play. I said, okay, you have these two teams, you have to build the system. Third team, you have to tell them what you need. You need a web server, you need a database server, MySQL, you need to set up the structure for your own database. They are going to build it. That team was fantastic. They knew things that it was, the way that team works, they finished it. That was one of the things that they did a whole coursework in 2 weeks, and I said, okay, what do I do with you now for the rest of the course? But from a programming perspective, from an integration perspective, I don't expect the students to know how to set up a server. In our program, part of the core is Linux, so they do have to learn Linux, yes. But I don't expect them to know that here. What I do expect them to know is you need someone to build the server for you, and you need to know where and how to deploy a system. So systems deployment, I'm adding to the course. Yes. Building the server, no. Although they do have a course for that. Yes.
Would it be feasible or more realistic maybe if you had a VM where you were able to put a server out there for them to use for this to save some time but still give them instruction? Or would that be defeating some of the purpose?
Well, the thing of the VM, there's two sides to that question. One is, I'm not going to ask them to know how to set up a server themselves. So in that sense, I should be giving them all the infrastructure they need. What I do ask them is, you tell me what you need. And this is in the capstone, because what I'm going to talk about this presentation is, that was my experience, that's what I learned, this is what I'm teaching them, where I'm fixing those holes. So in the capstone, I'm not asking them to set up a server. I'm having another set of students setting up a server. As for the practicality of it, at UMass, we have some issues with setting up our own technology. We have some limitations. Our own IT department, separate from us, they are very restrictive about what we can and what we cannot do. For this course, I was lucky, somewhat lucky. I have a server laying on my office that I turn on when I'm not in the office or when I'm doing class, because that thing is loud and it generates a lot of heat. So they could access and play around with it. And it was one server. We set up 4 virtual machines in there for each team, so there were 8 virtual machines running on that one server. That represented the different pieces in that. But
so you worked around the administration to get what you needed.
Well, I didn't tell them the administration. Don't publish that, please. And it was on and off, but yes, it's very. There are some administrative restrictions there, but it would be ideal if I could. I'm trying to solve that for the next semester. So I started with that. I found out this is what they need, and I had to take my very nice high-level system integration course that I said, okay, let's do service-oriented architectures, let's do web services, let's do all this kind of cool stuff. And now I'm saying, wait, let's go back to object-oriented programming. And let's see what 2 classes, you build one, you build another. Okay, now connect them. Work together and share code. So I built a set of projects that build on one another. These are not really independent of each other, although I try them to make them independent from the standpoint that if you fail on one, you can still move on. But the knowledge still builds on top of one another. And I'm going to show you how they go. But I start with connecting to classes and sharing code from a white box perspective, using and sharing libraries. That's a black box perspective, because now you don't know what's going on in the code, you just know how to use it. I add a little bit of connecting to a database. The remote, that's an easy part, but that's a good thing, because connecting to a database is a piece of cake, but I can teach them what an API is, and I can teach them how to use, I can add the connectivity part in the context of a simple project. Then I get into client-server. I have to make the client-server application very simple so that the connection becomes the focus. And then turning the client-server into an XML base, and then from there going into a web services. I'm hoping it works. Yes?
With the security, do you do, like when you connect to the database, do you put the password in a encrypted, or do you do this in a really realistic fashion?
No, and on purpose. And the reason is twofold. One is we have a whole course on system security that they have to take as part of their coursework. So I'm saying, okay, I don't need to. And the other is, if I do that, it adds a layer of complexity that maybe they miss on, that it makes them, they student, it's very hard in itself to learn this stuff. And with the database, it's easy. But when you talk about networks, it's networks in itself, using a client server, setting up a socket, setting up a protocol, they have to agree on a protocol. That in itself is a lot of work for 1 or 2 weeks of coursework. So if I say, okay, now add encryption to that. No, I'm going to let the other guy take care of that. At least in my project. Now, one of the things for this presentation is projects 5, 6, and 7. Those are high-level course. Okay, I'm assuming that most of you here are in a community college, in the context of the community college. This is a 400 level or a 4th year, or it could be a 3rd or 4th programming course if you have a heavy-duty programming program, development program. Project 4 could go anywhere. It's pretty flexible, it's simple enough. You can put it in your database course, you can put it in your programming course, you can put it anywhere. Projects 1, 2, and 3, I would like to see those projects in the introduction to programming courses, so that by the time they come to higher level or more applied courses, they already know or understand some of that stuff, as opposed to, let's not do that, as opposed to having to figure out on their own. Because what I found out is half did figure out, half did not. And we just have to help them, okay, sit down, figure it out. Instead of, okay, if you do, you do, if you don't, you don't. So this is the same courses that I just taught, the same projects that I just taught. We start with a simple, yes?
Quick question. You said there are 2 different groups. Are they in the same class or different sections?
This was in this capstone is a project-based and they work in teams. So
they don't meet regularly with you, or they do?
Yeah, they meet twice a week with me.
One section, both groups
One
together?
section, all 3 groups, because the administration group, the guys who actually set up the server, were there as well.
So do you mix the people that have the students that have the expertise, so that share what they need to learn with each other?
Well, no. Well, the capstone is more of a hands-on project oriented. They just have to work on the project.
Individually or as a team?
As a team.
So would the team members be made up of somebody from infrastructure, networking, programming, or no?
No. Well, we have only 2 groups, 2 tracks. We have system administration and information architecture. And it's 2 different projects. The system administration people have a system administration project, which in this case was setting up the server for the other guys. And the information architecture project, they had to build this one system. And I did not assign them to teams. I said, okay, form 2 teams, and they made their own teams. We just came together and discussed how are you doing. A lot of the time we spend doing some remedial stuff and trying to fix filling these gaps.
I thought it's really interesting what you're talking about in terms of what you need, what you wish you had. You know, like this capstone project, what you wish all the students knew when they came to you. Do you have a list of those things that could put together? So, because people in the community colleges can change their curriculum to help provide this information. So, it's very helpful.
From the capstone perspective, one thing, I'm focusing more on the integrative part, and this is what I'm saying. These are the things, the first slide. This is what I say, this is what they don't know from a programming perspective. From a networking perspective, I wouldn't touch it. And I wouldn't touch it because the wish list of this one dude who teaches the capstone is not really what you need from a community college perspective. And I invite you to my, I'll be having a presentation with Deborah Bogart at 1:30 where we actually talk about these transfers and what we need specifically for that. My one advice is, if you want to know what's the best way to transfer, is try to mirror our lower level courses. And when I'm saying, I wish they knew this from a networking perspective, I'm not talking about community colleges, I'm talking about my own guys teaching networking. And if I cannot convince, I have to convince them first before I come to you and say, okay, this is what I want you to do. Because if our own professors don't teach the programmatic side of networks, I wouldn't recommend you do it either.
Do you think it's more of an issue of the students not having the base knowledge that they need, or do you think it's more of a problem of the students not having the initiative to try to learn whatever is necessary to get a project done? I taught some of the capstone projects here, final year in engineering, robotic projects, and I find that in some cases the students, it's a whole driven, type of stuff. They are actually asking, okay, I need to get this done. They just ask me as a consultant, okay, where should we go here? I just point the direction, and they all go in that direction. They learn whatever they need in order to complete the projects.
I think it's both, and I think that to some extent it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day they don't know it. If they don't have the initiative to learn it on their own, I think that they should still know it, and if they are not gonna go and learn it, we have to push them somehow. In general, in other areas, I would say, look, if you don't want to learn it on your own, so be it. In this particular case, I'm saying some of these things, particularly these parts, I don't think we should leave it up to them to figure it out. I think that if we include, and that's what I want to show you, if we include these simple projects, okay, you make a class, you call a method on this class. And I'm not going to tell you anything else. If we put just that one simple project, they have to get together and agree on what method is that going to be. Because that's the other thing. Now I'm switching to the integrative since I'm done with the custom. In the integrative, course, the first time I taught it is, I'm saying, okay, very simple multiple choice question for an exam that I love. Tricky on purpose. It's, okay, you have this class that offers this method, which is send birthday or give birthday. Which of these methods should the requesting class use? And I put give birthday, get birthday, request birthday, and something else. 30% of the students actually know that they have to match them. And it's a stupid simple choice, multiple choice question that I invite you to put in your programs. You have one class, and you put not the standard get, because the standard get they know it because they saw it, but change the get to a give. And then put give, ask, request, something else. They don't put it together that they have to match it. And it's this simple, let's do this simple exercise. You and you work together. You do the requester, you do the other class. And then the one that offers the method. And that's the first one that I'm proposing. Yes?
That's part of what we all do is computational thinking, right? We give them the tools that they need to know, and what they don't know, we give them resources. It may not be even a manual or a book that you have in your class, but you point them to where they can get similar or use what they already know to find out more answers to make it possible for them to be successful.
And I understand with that. My message here is that's not necessarily enough. There's 2 or 3 things that need to click in the students. That if they don't click, it's not really about having the resources and being able to go and search it. It's about figuring it out. And having 2 methods match on both sides of the equation.
Sounds logical to me.
Yeah, but they don't do it. I invite you to, if you teach a course on programming, to add this into your multiple choice questions. It's the stupidest multiple choice question, and it's they have to actually think a little bit, because then it's not, what do you have to do? Do you have to match them? Do you have to do this? No, they have to match them, but they have to know that they have to match them. And it's tricky because one is give, the other is ask, get, request, give. And they are going to go for one of the asks. And if they do that, they haven't figured it out yet. And what I'm saying is, let's give them a little push in this one. What I do here with this 6-7 project is build that kind of knowledge. The research is, yes, you can now go and research on how to build a client server, how to do the technical stuff. This is more the logical stuff, that the conceptual stuff that I saw was missing a little bit. So the projects are, start with the basic, you do it yourself, then the share, one student does one class, the other student does the other class, you put it on a text file, you give the text file to the other student, they exchange the text file, and it has to work, but they have to get together and say, okay, this is the method we're using. Yes?
I used to do something like that before. I never changed it over to object-oriented, but I would have the students fold the paper down so they couldn't see the code, they could only see the comment, the method header and the comment.
Okay.
So the one writing the call to that method couldn't see the implementation.
Okay.
Yeah, so that they would have to call it. So they're relying on the student who wrote it, they're relying on their documentation in order to launch.
And that, with the documentation, I get into that further apart when I start talking about libraries. I'm saying, because now you have the Java docs and your Java IDE, you press a button and they are going to publish the Java docs. So now you can give, yes.
Sorry, just basically, I come from work with computer science and software engineering.
Okay.
How much programming are students doing?
They don't do a whole lot.
Okay. It strikes me that these are programming type, right?
But they are. they are. Integration is programming. Integrative programming is a course on making programs play nice to each other. So it's programming.
So I'm thinking that we would say when I was in college, in my sophomore year, sophomore engineering course, we were doing things like these concepts. So maybe it's more of an issue that there's less programming background.
My take on this is the programming background is more focused on programming than on sharing coding and programming. So they know how to do a while loop, they know how to do arrays, they know how to do compares. The putting things together they don't have. And that's why I'm trying to say, okay, these are the first three are very simple projects that you can add to your freshman and sophomore courses to start getting into that mindset of putting things together as you learn how to program. You don't just learn the programming, you learn how to program. The other three are when you go into the larger design stuff, like yes.
What's a normal part of the division in computer science?
Yeah, the normal part is what sometimes what I found the students that got to me on the capstone course, they needed a little help on that part. It wasn't the overall story here is it's not as normal in IT yet. In software engineering, probably because that's how the program starts. It starts more from the engineering perspective, and then software came into place. That mindset is part of it. In IT, we start more with the technology first, and the engineering comes more as an afterthought. So let's become a little more engineers in IT. But I agree. That I think is the whole purpose here is let's add a little engineering to our lower level programming courses. So let me see if I can get somewhere there. So we start simple, we add the collaboration, we add the library, which is, okay, now you share the code. Now instead of sharing the code, you compile it and you give the binaries. And because you're giving the binaries, I do what you did. I'll show you the header. Instead of just being in the form of a header, you have to give the Java docs, or even in the Java docs, the documentation side of your library. On my library, it's not a library, it's just one class with one method, but it has to be enough that they understand how to share these things. And when connecting to the database, we talk about APIs and we talk about host ports, connections in a safe context because they don't have to do much. And then they get into the complex part, which is programming the network sockets and going into XML and web services. That is where things get tricky. But I also introduced Jane, who is this other programmer who students may know or may not know. And the goal here is, okay, first you start sharing with your partner, but then you have to share with strangers your code. You have to either use code that was developed by a stranger, or you have to develop code for a stranger to use. So I introduced this character that is going to give students this context, because these are young students who don't understand, they need some visuals. The projects, they are all part of one big project, and I decided CRM is a perfectly good example. So we're going to develop a CRM, the beginnings of the CRM. We start with a person object, and we have an interaction object, and we have a date of birth and an email object, or stuff, so methods. So, okay, thank you. So it's going to be a CRM, and First is, let's create the person class. And the person class has some attributes, and you have your main, calls the person class, gets the data, and prints it out to the screen or the console. I start with a few attributes, date of birth, names, your basic constructor, your loader that I don't think I'm going to add on this one, and then your standard setters and getters. In the context of the class that I'm doing, these might not be a project, you might not want to add the setters and getters, but since I'm doing this in the context of an integrative programming class, I want to start talking about encapsulation. If nothing else from the perspective of encapsulating attributes. So you don't access the attributes, you access the methods that give you the values for the attributes. It should be a simple project that they could do. On the next one is, let's complicate it just a tad. Now we add collaboration. So we have 2 students, we have the same person class, we just have to add age. H-E, not the letter H. I always say that. Because of the complexity of calculating age in Java, I'm going to add an age attribute right now for starters. Although for the students, I would tell them, okay, figure out how to calculate age. I give you the date of birth, you create a method that calculates age. But then the second student develops the person class, or they both work on the person class. Now, if I do this in a lab setting, I'm going to say age is an attribute. If I do this as homework, I'm going to say figure out how to calculate age. In a lab setting, I'm not going to tell them what the name of the method is to request the age. I'm going to let them figure it out. So you create the method, you have the age attribute, you create the method that gives the age, the value of the age. You add to your main class the thing that requests it. And they have to be, you have to figure out that they have to put it together. In comes Jane. And now we add a library. And I was looking for libraries, what's the library that is easier to use and most significant to use. I found that Google made a mail library. So now you have your person, you can request the birth month, because you have the date of birth, you can request the birth month, and if the birth month matches the current month, you can send a happy birthday email to that person. So we create a new class called customer services, and this is where the CRM starts to come into play, because up to now it was on one person. We add the method in this customer service, which is birth month. So if you say, hey, tell me it's the birth month of this customer, if the answer is a Boolean yes or true, then go to customer services again and send a happy birthday email to this customer. And now that I think of it, I forgot to add the email to the attributes of the person. In this case, they are going to have to use Java docs to know how to use the library. So again, instead of building a Java docs, now they have to use Java docs or the specification. Now they have to share. They just did the services, the customer services. Now they have to package it into its own package and give it so that somebody else can add it to their program and use it. Some things change when you do this, because now the package changes. Before, it was all part of the same package. Now you have your main package, and then you have your customer services library that becomes its own package. So you have to start, oh, now I have a library, I have to add it, I have to import the package, I have to do, and you have to share it. So the focus here is going to be sharing a library. The 1 week is going to be dedicated exclusively to building a library and publishing a library. As simple as it sounds, it's pretty much the foundation for most of what comes after. If they figure out how to build, and there's deployment issues here involved, the whole logic of building applications is pretty much embedded in this simple thing. Everything else is just technologies. Learning about networks, learning about XML. This is the conceptual. This is where everything pretty much comes together. Yeah, excuse me, hold on. So we just built a library, now we use a different library, the database. I'm going to skip the database in the interest of time. The one thing I'm going to tell you about the database is that when you get into this project, you have to build your own database. The way I do it in a lab setting is I install my SQL in my computer. I figure out what the IP address I get assigned that date, and I say, okay, this is the IP address. Ideally, again, going back to the server thing, I would like to have a MySQL server with a static IP address that students can access in their off time when they are not coming to class. Very hard for me to do.
Is that machine available then from the outside?
No, that's my computer. That's my laptop.
Students from outside use it? You said there was a server in your office, no?
The server in my office is off. I haven't set it up to have my SQL open to it.
I know that's our problem at the university, where the administration will not let us get through their firewall to get to it.
We have very, I think we only have port 80 open. So we have to do everything FTP, and we start putting things on port 80 that you shouldn't be doing on port 80. But also if they figure out, if you leave it on for long enough and they figure it out, they are going to block your port, which is the same one I use for my regular computer. So I end up without a network and having to ask for a lot of favors, which yeah, it's a problem. Yes.
But in situations like this, one of the solutions that I have used is I use virtual machine technology. So I just build, I just scrap the entire thing. I make a virtual server with Apache, MySQL, and everything else already installed. And then the students will get the virtual machine in the form of this image. And they can log in and they can customize both the web server and also the database server, populate tables and stuff like that. And depending on the infrastructure, they can connect it with not as local host, because you can actually get a virtual network interface and have its own IP address. So basically, to the students, it's almost the same exercise as connecting to an external machine, except it is running locally. And then you don't have to set up anything in your office, and the students can close the entire thing, and they just have to back up one single file, restore that one single file, and everything is back to the original state.
Yeah, I like that idea. I have to see what it would take to do it. Yeah. In the context of this class, I don't want them to be messing with the database because they have to access a database that is already there.
You can pre-install your entire database, everything, and the students just have to double-click on an icon and start up the virtual machine, and they're ready for that.
Okay. I like that idea. I'm liking that idea. Okay, so we run out of time. I didn't get to cover the client-server application. Give me 1 second. The client-server application, the other thing they have to do is they have to agree, they have to figure out the protocol before they actually go into building the thing. That's the thing that they have to figure out. Next project is putting that into XML. Again, they have to design the XML schema before they develop the application. So it's all building up one little piece at a time, and it's more developing this mindset of how to put things together. Some things I like to see put into the lower level courses, and some things, for now, I have to put this all into one big course that I wished originally was more focused on the higher level integration stuff. But I have to go down to the basics. So this is what this course and these projects are about. I'll tell you how they go. Some of these I'm going to be trying again. But it's a work in progress. And thank you very much.